this debate, the proposition haven't really thought about what it is they're proposing. Because they're not just proposing that prostitution is bad and people probably can't consent to that, right? They are telling us that if, as the motion says, consent is not a source of moral authority, then it is morally equivalent if society says that two people should have sex, whether or not they agree or not, right? So Mano said assisted suicide. They are telling us it is morally equivalent when the Japanese state forces people or forced people to commit seppuku, right, without their consent, as to when I ask my wife to kill me because I no longer want to live, because I've fully thought about the consequences that are in my life. If what they're saying is true, then those two things are equivalent, right? Because both groups of people are killed, right? And society says they should be killed. And if consent is relevant, then people being executed by the society is equivalent to people choosing from their own sense of morality that they might want to die. I'm also intrigued as to what this thing is they keep talking about called society, if it's not a collection of people. We've never heard where this magic source of authority is that's not people, right? And they tell us right at the beginning that the reason we can tell that morality is objective because most societies share it, right? Because those societies choose to adopt that morality. So they agree to have that morality. They consent to have that morality. Doesn't it seem like they are then drawing their morality from consent? That's important that those societies agreed, right? And also, I mean, I'm just doing that to illustrate, but it's just abundantly untrue that societies have agreed on morality, right? Lots of societies think prostitution is fine. Lots of them always have. Some don't. Lots think being gay is fine. Some don't. Lots think being a woman is equal to being a man. Lots don't, right? They focus on a couple of tiny things where most societies across time have agreed, but most societies have disagreed about fundamental questions. Religion, life, war, right? Morality is not objective. They need to tell us how it is, and if they're going to tell us it is objective, it really can't be sourced from some sort of quasi-consent, right? That's just silly. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is, I'm going to talk about why it's critical that in societies we put the moral legitimacy first and foremost on individuals, right? Why that's important, and not on some diffuse notion of morality, not on some diffuse notion of society, right? Because they tell us the things that we experience in life affect us, and that can distort our morality, right? Firstly, why is that not true of societies? Why is that not true of states, right? Can't they also be affected by mass panic, like after 9/11, right? How is that any better, right? They never told us, than individuals, right? But let's think about this, right? To come back to where I came from. They're saying that when I realise I'm gay, that's a situation that affects me, that distorts my morals. And they're saying as society, they know better that my gayness is wrong, and I shouldn't allow my morals to be corrupted by my realisation that I'm gay, and they as society are going to tell me that I shouldn't be allowed to do that. So even though I consent to having this sex and to defining myself as gay and being gay, because I'm distorting their society and their vision of morals, they're not willing to do that, right? And I think we can all see intuitively, we think that's probably pretty horrific, right? But why is it horrific, right? Because there will always be outsiders in societies. There will always be groups of people who are stigmatized, right? Jews should know this better than anyone, right? There are always going to be groups of people who don't adopt conventional morality, right? But we think it's probably fine that they do that, right? Because we adopt our social morality by us being challenged by other people's morality, right? So when Jews, for example, say, well, maybe money lending might allow us to build complex societies that might support things like a welfare state, might support things like industrial institutions that might allow us to build things, right? Lots of Christians say, well, money lending is just wrong, right? But because of that clash of values, we then come to the position that money lending probably could be okay under certain circumstances, right? So you have different values. You had Enlightenment values arriving in a society and saying, maybe religion isn't the source of authority, maybe my consent is, right? And that clash of values changed society. We didn't completely abandon religion, right? We said religion was important in some respects, Enlightenment values are important in other respects, right? If you say values are static, right, morality is static because it's not from consent, it's from society, right, from the majority. Majority is always going to be able to resist minorities and their different values. If they were stopped from even being able to say, I'm going to undertake these actions, I'm going to define myself in this way that defies your values, right? that is astonishingly repressive, but it also stops social progress, it stops values ever being challenged, and is problematic, right? But there are also just other things that mean it's always going to be problematic, right? So, when you say rights come from groups like society, right, come from the group of the majority, and not from individuals, then you get the huge instrumentalization of individuals, because their individual consent is not important if the group, like the group's morality, says it's fine, right? That's when you get, like, the castration of homosexuals, that's when you get the forced suicide of the disabled, that's when you get the expulsion of Jews, right? Because we say, well, we all think it's okay, right? We as morality, as social morality, think it's okay, so it's not problematic for us to pick off minorities, right? Pick off different groups. We can see that always leads to everyone ultimately being attacked, because everyone can be attacked for some reason, right? Majority moral opinion can always attack someone for some reason. So we have to protect every individual and their individual conception, their individual consent, because that's the only way that everyone is protected, right? If we say it's only about the group, then we hurt everyone, and that's a terrible way to design our societies, right? Particularly when even majority groups are historically disempowered, like women. When you say their consent is not important, when society says marriage is a contract that involves certain duties, right, like marital duties, right, and then you say, well, the woman can't say no to having sex, because society says that wives should have sex with husbands, right, your lack of consent is not relevant, it's not morally legitimate. We've decided you should be a partnership, you should undertake these duties, you should bear this man's children, right? I think it's probably pretty horrific to say you can't make individual consent, right? Individual consent is not important. It is morally equivalent if he rapes you or if you say, I want to have children. I think that's a pretty horrific way to run a society, but I think it does happen, right? We have seen that it does happen. We accepted this for hundreds of years. The problem is it's potentially a very viable way to run a society, but is it a moral way to run a society? Is it a sensible way to run a society? Is it fundamentally a legitimate way to run a society? No. We beg to oppose.